Hello everyone, I'm gonna show you the progress on Operation Bloodshed. I've made a lot of changes, I've added a lot of new elements. So as you can see, the editor now displays many elements at the same time, and they cycle so you can find easily the element you want. For this video I'll just create an example room and demonstrate some of the new elements. So let's set a player spawn point here, for example, and let's show the vending machines. So this is a vending machine that heals you. If you go near the vending machine, you can see on the status bar that it displays how many crystals you need to pay for how many HP. So you need to pay 10 shards to heal yourself for 1 HP. So let's get some damage and demonstrate. Okay, now I have 20 shards, so I can go here and heal myself for 2 health points. I will probably add when I add ammunition, I will probably also add ammunition vending machines that work in the same way, and maybe let the user decide the cost and the effectiveness of vending machines in the editor. So I've also tweaked the spawners. Now they also can be enabled and disabled by ID. So basically, if you create a spawner like this one, set some parameters. For example, I want enemies to spawn every 30 milliseconds, and I want the ID to be 0, and to spawn 10 enemies of type 0. Then we can also add a pressure plate of ID 0. And if we start the level, you can see that the spawner is currently off, but as soon as we step on the pressure plate, it becomes on and enemies start spawning. When the number of enemies is finished, the spawner is automatically destroyed, and you have to destroy all spawners to clear a level, so you need to turn them all on, basically. I've also added a new kind of pressure plate, which is an on-off pressure plate. Basically, if you stand on and off of it, it will repeatedly trigger the object with the same ID. I have to put it on the ground level. Okay, so as you can see, if I step on it, and while it's stepped on, the doors stay open. As soon as I step off of it, the door closes. So you can also have some kind of puzzles when where you need an enemy to move on a pressure plate and open you a door, for example. Or also it could be useful for crowd control and other kind of strange levels. The user will figure out many cool combinations in the editor. The same pressure plate can obviously be applied to spawners, so if we change the ID to demonstrate, I can turn off and on the spawner and let enemies come at the rate I desire. I've also added a new type of trapdoors. This is the normal trapdoor, and this is the player only trapdoor, and well, it's simple to understand. The player can trigger both normal and player only trapdoors, while the enemies can only trigger the red ones, so it can be used for one-way only passages that only the player can go into, and many other interesting things. Explosives, I haven't shown them in a video, I've just made a GIF image. So explosives are these crates, and when you shoot the crate, it explodes, and basically deals a large amount of damage to everything around it. So if we, for example, create a simple barrier here and add some enemies, yeah, they will escape the barrier because they are so bouncy. But I hope I can somehow trigger that explosive. Yeah, I couldn't do it. So let me demonstrate with a well-made barrier in the editor. Obviously explosions follow explosions are blocked by walls, so if there is a wall on the left and a wall on the right, the explosion will most likely be in a horizontal direction. Now it should be easier to kill most of the enemies because of the 3 explosive blocks. Exactly, so they are an effective tool to create traps for the player, or they can be used to allow the player to kill a lot of enemies at the same time. I've also added an ID to the explosions, to the explosive crates, sorry, so you can set your ID here, and they can obviously be triggered on by pressure plates. Explosion can also be chained, so if you have something like this, oops, okay, if you have something like this, you can shoot the last explosive crate and it will chain to the end of explosive crates. And the FPS impact is minimal. There is basically no slowdown for explosions. I've also made some changes to the way weapons are handled in the game. In the past, weapons and enemies were on the same sprite, and with that I mean that the weapon was part of the enemy sprite. Now they're completely separate, so you can easily create new weapons for enemies and have the same enemy type with multiple weapons. You can see this effect also on the player. Let me remove the enemies. Okay. As you can see, when I have the machine gun, I have this black and grey weapon. When I switch to the plasma gun, I have the same weapon aliens use. When I switch to the plasma cannon, I have this big hand cannon gun. So it's a nice way to change weapon sprites both for the player and the enemies. And the results are basically the same as they were before, only it's easier to create new weapon types, and they can also be changed in-game dynamically via code.